The stars have no memory. They burn in silence, indifferent to the civilizations that rise beneath them, indifferent to the empires that crumble into dust while their light continues its ancient journey across the void. I have lived long enough to understand this truth, though understanding brings no comfort. I am the Elthric Soranoth, third harmonist of the Celestian Concordat, and I have watched stars die. I have seen worlds swallowed by the darkness between galaxies. I have witnessed the birth of species and mourned their extinction across spans of time that would break a lesser mind. But I had never known fear. Not truly, not until we declared war on Earth. The Concordat has existed for 11,000 years. We emerged from the crystalline caves of Sorenthal when humanity's ancestors were still learning to shape stone into tools. We mapped the gravitational currents between galaxies while humans painted crude images on cave walls. We built the first transgalactic communication network, established the protocols of civilized contact, and brought 17 species into our fold across millennia of patient expansion. We were ancient when the universe was young to others. We were wise. We were eternal. We were fools. I remember the first reports about Earth with something approaching embarrassment now. A small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in an unfashionable spiral arm of the galaxy. The dominant species had achieved primitive spaceflight barely 2 centuries ago. They had fragmented governments, inefficient resource distribution, and a troubling tendency toward internal conflict. Our analysts classified them as a Category 7 civilization, potentially spacefaring but centuries away from meaningful development. They were noted in our records and promptly forgotten. That was our first mistake. The war, when it came, had nothing to do with humanity. The Vorith hegemony had been our rivals for 6,000 years, their biomechanical fleets spreading through the outer reaches like a cancer. When their expansion finally threatened our core territories, the Concordat Council voted for preemptive action. We had superior technology, greater numbers, and the weight of history on our side. Victory was assured. The first battle of Sorenthos Prime cost us 40 million lives and 300 warships. The Vorith had developed weapons we had never seen, technologies that seemed to bend the fundamental laws of physics. Our shields failed, our ships burned, and for the first time in millennia, the Concordat knew defeat. But we adapted. We always had. We rebuilt our fleets, developed countermeasures, and pushed back. The war became a grinding stalemate, consuming resources and lives in equal measure. Both sides sought allies among the lesser species, offering protection and technology in exchange for military support. It was Ambassador Kareth who first suggested approaching the humans. They are aggressive, he argued before the council, territorial. They have a documented history of violence against their own kind. Properly directed, such tendencies could prove useful against the Vorith. The council debated for 3 cycles. Humanity was primitive, yes, but they had achieved faster-than-light travel remarkably quickly. Their ships were crude but functional. Their population was large and apparently expendable. They could serve as auxiliary forces, fodder to absorb Vorith attacks while our own fleets regrouped. I voted against the proposal, not out of any particular concern for humanity, but because I found the entire exercise distasteful. Using lesser species as living shields seemed beneath our dignity. But I was overruled, and Ambassador Karath was dispatched to Earth's primary orbital station to deliver our terms. He never returned. The humans rejected our offer. Not with anger or defiance, but with a quiet, unsettling politeness that our diplomats found deeply confusing. They expressed sympathy for our conflict with the Vorith. They offered humanitarian aid to our civilian populations, but they would not fight our war. "We have our own concerns," their representative had said, according to the recordings. "Perhaps when your conflict is resolved, we can discuss mutual cooperation." The council was incensed. How dare these primitives refuse us? We had offered them the opportunity to join the greatest civilization in the galaxy, and they had declined as though we were merchants peddling inferior goods. Ambassador Karath's recommendation was swift and unanimous. Humanity must be compelled to understand their place in the cosmic order. We sent a battle fleet to Earth's solar system, 47 warships, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They carried a simple message: join our war effort or face the consequences. The humans destroyed them in 17 minutes. I was in the council chamber when the reports arrived. I remember the silence, the absolute stillness as we struggled to comprehend what we were seeing. 47 warships, crewed by our finest officers, armed with weapons that had burned Vorith dreadnoughts from the sky, gone. The sensor logs showed human vessels appearing from nowhere, weapons of impossible precision, and then nothing but debris and silence. "This is a mistake," Counselor Varoth said, her voice trembling. "A sensor malfunction. Our fleet is merely out of communication range." But it was not a mistake. 3 days later, a human vessel appeared at the edge of our territory. A single ship, small and unassuming, broadcasting on all frequencies. Its message was brief. "We did not seek this conflict. We do not desire war, but we will defend ourselves against any who threaten our home. If you send more ships, they will meet the same fate. This is not a threat, it is simply the truth. We hope you will choose peace." The council chose war. I argued against it. I begged them to reconsider, to study this new enemy before committing to a conflict we did not understand. But pride is a poison that clouds even the wisest minds. We had ruled this region of space for 11,000 years. We would not be humiliated by primitives who had barely learned to walk among the stars. We committed 2,000 warships to the assault on Earth. Our greatest fleet, our most advanced weapons, our most experienced commanders. They represented the culmination of 11 millennia of military development. They jumped into human space with absolute confidence. The battle lasted 4 hours. We lost everything. This time, there were survivors. Escape pods that made it back to our territory carrying broken, traumatized officers who struggled to describe what they had witnessed. Human ships that moved like living things, anticipating our maneuvers before we made them. Weapons that bypassed our shields as though they didn't exist. And the humans themselves, fighting with a coordination and precision that seemed almost choreographed, as though every ship, every weapon, every decision was part of a single unified consciousness. "They knew," one commander whispered, his eyes hollow. "They knew what we were going to do before we did it. Every tactic, every strategy, they had already prepared a counter.
It was like fighting our own shadows.
The Voreth, sensing our weakness, struck 3 days later. With our primary fleet destroyed, they pushed deep into our territory, capturing world after world. Our defensive lines collapsed, billions died, and still we refused to admit the truth.
We sent more ships against Earth. Smaller raids, probing attacks, attempts to find weaknesses in their defenses. Each one ended the same way. Our vessels destroyed, our crews killed or captured, and always that same message broadcast in the aftermath.
We do not desire war. We hope you will choose peace. But we could not choose peace. The war with the Voreth consumed everything, our resources, our population, our very will to survive. And in our desperation, we continued to hurl ourselves against humanity, as though victory there might somehow compensate for our failures elsewhere.
It was madness, I see that now. But when you are drowning, you grasp at anything that floats.
The fall of Sorenthal was the end. Our homeworld, the birthplace of our civilization, the seat of the Concordat Council for 11,000 years, taken by the Voreth in a single devastating assault. Billions died in the initial bombardment. Billions more were captured and subjected to the Voreth's biomechanical conversion process, their minds stripped away and their bodies transformed into living weapons.
I survived only because I was not there. I had been sent to oversee our remaining fleet in the Outer Territories, an assignment I had initially resented, but which ultimately saved my life. When word came of Sorenthal's fall, I felt something break inside me. Not my body, my certainty. For the first time in my long existence, I did not know what to do. Our remaining forces were scattered and demoralized. The Voreth continued their advance, consuming everything in their path. We had perhaps months before complete extinction. And in my desperation, I made a decision that the Council would have considered unthinkable.
I went to Earth.
Not with a fleet, not with weapons. I went alone, in a small diplomatic vessel, broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. I expected to die. The humans had every reason to destroy me on sight, after everything we had done to them. But I no longer cared about my own survival. I cared only about my people. And humanity was the only power in the galaxy that might be able to stop the Voreth. They did not destroy me. They did not even threaten me. My vessel was intercepted by a human patrol ship that escorted me almost gently to a station orbiting their 4th planet. I was met by a small delegation of humans who treated me with a courtesy I had not expected and did not deserve. The station was utilitarian in design, functional rather than beautiful. I had expected grandeur, some display of the power that had annihilated our fleets. Instead, I found clean corridors, efficient systems, and humans who nodded politely as they passed. It was unsettling in its normalcy. They brought me to a conference room with a view of the red planet below. A woman was waiting for me, dressed in simple civilian clothes, her gray hair pulled back from a face lined with age. She rose when I entered and extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Harmonist Sorenath," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I am Director Chen Wei. Please sit. You've come a long way." I lowered myself into a chair designed for beings of different proportions. It was uncomfortable, but I barely noticed. I was studying her, searching for some sign of the terrifying power that had destroyed our fleets. I found nothing but a tired woman who looked like she carried heavy burdens.
"You know why I am here," I said.
I can guess. She settled into her own chair across from me. "Your war with the Voreth is not going well. You've lost your homeworld. Your fleets are shattered. And despite everything that has passed between our peoples, you're here to ask for our help." I had prepared elaborate diplomatic arguments, carefully constructed appeals to mutual interest and galactic stability. In that moment, facing this quiet woman with her knowing eyes, all of it seemed absurd.
"Yes," I said simply. "I am here to beg."
She did not react with satisfaction or contempt as I had expected. Instead, she sighed, a sound heavy with weariness, and leaned back in her chair. "Tell me about the Voreth," she said. "Not the military briefings, we have those. Tell me about what they've done to your people, what you've seen." I did not understand the purpose of the question, but I answered anyway. I told her about the worlds I had watched fall, the populations converted into mindless biomechanical soldiers. I told her about the refugee ships we had tried to evacuate, and how the Voreth had hunted them down one by one. I told her about the children we had sent away in desperate hope, only to receive their converted bodies back as weapons against us. I told her about Sorenthal, about the gardens that had grown for 8,000 years, now burned to ash, about the libraries containing the accumulated knowledge of 100 civilizations, now lost forever, about my siblings, my extended family, my friends, all gone, either dead or worse than dead. Somewhere in the telling, I began to weep. I had not wept in centuries, had almost forgotten I was capable of it. The tears burned tracks down my face as words poured out of me, all the horror and grief and shame I had been carrying since this war began. Director Chen listened in silence. When I finally stopped, she reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was warm and soft, and the gesture was so unexpectedly kind that it nearly broke me entirely. "I'm sorry," she said, and I believed her. "No one should have to witness what you've witnessed. No one should have to carry what you're carrying." "You could have stopped this," I whispered, "if we had allied with you from the beginning, if we had not been so arrogant." "Perhaps," she agreed. "Or perhaps the Voreth would have attacked you regardless, and the outcome would have been the same. We can't know, and it doesn't matter now. What matters is what we do next." I looked up at her, hardly daring to hope. "You will help us?" "That depends." She released my hand and sat back again, her expression thoughtful. "I need to understand something first, Harmonist. Why did your people attack us? We offered you nothing but friendship. We refused your war, yes, but we posed no threat to you. Why send fleets against us when you were already fighting for survival?" It was a fair question, a devastating question, and I found that I did not have a satisfying answer. "Pride," I said finally. "Fear. You rejected us, and we could not understand why. Your technology was impossibly advanced, far beyond what we believed possible for such a young species. You were an unknown variable in an already unstable situation, and our leaders decided that you needed to be controlled, conquered if necessary." "And now?" I spread my hands helplessly. "Now we are dying. Now I understand that we never understood anything. We thought we were the pinnacle of galactic civilization. We thought our age made us wise. But you—" I shook my head, struggling to articulate thoughts I had been wrestling with for months. "You are infants by our standards. Your civilization is barely a heartbeat old.
And yet you possess power that makes our greatest achievements look like children's toys. How is this possible?" Director Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. "Tell me, Harmonist, what do you know about Earth's history, about humanity's past?" "Very little," I admitted. "Our records indicated you spent most of your existence fighting among yourselves. Territorial conflicts, ideological wars, struggles for resources. It seemed wasteful."
"Wasteful," she repeated, a strange smile touching her lips. "Yes, I suppose it would look that way from the outside. But those wars, those terrible, wasteful wars, they taught us things that peaceful civilizations never learn. They taught us to adapt, to innovate under pressure, to find unity in the face of extinction." She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the rust-colored planet below. "My great-grandfather fought in a war that killed 60 million people in 6 years. My grandmother survived a plague that wiped out a third of our population. My mother was born in a bunker while nuclear weapons fell on cities just miles away. Every generation of my family, for as far back as we have records, has faced some crisis that should have destroyed us, and every generation has found a way to survive."
"But surely that cannot account for your technology," I said. "The weapons that destroyed our fleets."
"Were developed in secret," she said, turning back to face me. "While we showed the galaxy our primitive rockets and our crude, faster-than-light drives, our scientists were working on things we never revealed. Because we knew, Harmonist. We always knew that the galaxy would eventually come for us. We had seen what happened to species that revealed their full capabilities too soon. They were conquered, absorbed, or destroyed by older civilizations that saw them as threats."
I felt a chill run through me. You were hiding.
"We were preparing," she corrected gently. "We learned from our own history that the universe is not a kind place, that strength invites challenge and weakness invites conquest. So we showed weakness while building strength. We played the role of primitives while developing technologies that would ensure our survival against any threat."
"For how long?" "Since we first detected your Concordat's existence. Nearly 200 years.
200 years! While we had been dismissing humanity as insignificant, they had been studying us, preparing for us, developing weapons specifically designed to defeat us. The realization was staggering.
"You knew we would eventually attack you," I said.
"We hoped you wouldn't. We genuinely hoped that contact with alien civilizations would be peaceful, that we could join the galactic community as partners rather than subjects. But we prepared for the alternative. We always prepare for the alternative."
I thought of my own people's history. 11,000 years of relative peace and prosperity. We had faced challenges, of course, rival species, natural disasters, the occasional internal conflict, but nothing that truly threatened our existence, nothing that forced us to evolve under the pressure of annihilation.
Humanity had faced that pressure continuously for their entire existence, and it had forged them into something we could not comprehend.
"What happens now?" I asked. "Will you watch us die as punishment for our attacks on your people?"
Director Chen returned to her seat, studying me with those tired, knowing eyes. "That's what some of our leaders want," she admitted. "You killed thousands of our citizens, destroyed ships and stations. The calls for vengeance are significant."
I bowed my head, accepting the judgment I knew we deserved.
"But I didn't fight my way to this position to indulge in vengeance," she continued,
And neither did the people who matter. We've spent 2 centuries preparing for the worst, Harmonist. 2 centuries of sacrifice and secrecy, of watching our children train for wars we hoped would never come. We didn't do that to become conquerors or executioners. We did it so that when the darkness came, we would be ready to stand against it.
She leaned forward, her gaze intense. The Vorith are that darkness. We've been monitoring their expansion for decades. We know what they do to the species they conquer, and we have been waiting, preparing for the moment when they would become a threat to us.
You're going to fight them? I breathed.
We're going to end them, she said, and there was no boast in her voice, only certainty. Only the calm, terrifying confidence of a species that had stared into the abyss since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was looking back. I stayed on the human station for 3 weeks. They gave me quarters, access to their communications network, and freedom to observe their operations. I think they wanted me to see, to understand what they were and what they were capable of. What I saw terrified me more than the Vorith ever had. The mobilization began within days of my arrival. Human fleets that had been hidden throughout their solar system emerged from concealment. Thousands of ships that our intelligence had never detected. They came from asteroid mining stations that were actually shipyards, from research outposts that were actually weapons platforms, from colony ships that had never held colonists at all. Every human installation in their system, I realized, served dual purposes. Every civilian facility could be converted to military use within hours. Every transport ship carried hidden weapons. Every orbital platform had defensive capabilities that dwarfed our most advanced battle stations. They had been ready for war since before they ever made first contact. They had simply chosen not to fight. I watched their crews prepare with an efficiency that bordered on the mechanical. There was no chaos, no confusion, no hesitation. They moved like components of a vast machine, each person knowing exactly what was expected of them and executing their role with flawless precision. But they were not machines. I spoke with many of them during those weeks. Soldiers and scientists, engineers and commanders. They were people, with families and fears and hopes for the future. They laughed at jokes, mourned fallen comrades, and spoke longingly of the homes they might never see again. A young officer named James took me on a tour of one of their warships, the UNSS Perseverance. It was larger than any vessel in our remaining fleet, bristling with weapons I could not identify, and powered by engines that seemed to fold space itself around the hull. "What do you think?" he asked as we stood on the observation deck, watching technicians run final checks on the ship's systems. "I think I am very glad we are no longer enemies," I said honestly. He laughed, but there was no cruelty in it. "We were never really enemies, Harmonist. You were a test, a challenge to overcome. But the Vorith," his expression darkened, "they're different. What they do to people, the way they strip away everything that makes a person who they are, that's evil. That's the kind of thing we've been preparing to fight since we first understood that we weren't alone in the universe." "How can you be so calm about it?" I asked. "You're about to go to war against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far older than yours. Billions of your people could die." James considered the question seriously. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the wars she survived," he said finally. "Terrible wars, where millions died for causes that seem meaningless now. But she also told me about the people who stood up anyway, who fought anyway, who refused to let the darkness win, even when winning seemed impossible." He turned to face me directly. "That's who we are, Harmonist.
We're the species that fights anyway, that stands up anyway, that looks at impossible odds and says, we're going to try. And more often than not, we find a way.
I thought of my own people's response to the Vorith, the panic, the despair, the gradual acceptance of extinction. We had faced adversity before, but never like this. Never an enemy that could not be reasoned with, that could not be appeased, that wanted nothing less than our complete annihilation. We had not known how to fight such an enemy. We had not known how to survive such a threat.
But humanity had been preparing for exactly this moment for 200 years.
The fleet departed on the morning of my 23rd day among them. I stood on the observation deck of the station and watched as over 4,000 warships formed up in the void, their hulls gleaming in the light of the human sun. It was the largest military force I had ever seen assembled, and I knew it was only a fraction of what humanity was capable of deploying. Director Chen joined me as the fleet began its transit, ships vanishing one by one into artificially created wormholes that folded space across unimaginable distances.
"They'll reach Vorith space within 3 days," she said. "The main fleet will engage their defensive perimeter while strike teams target their central hive mind. If our intelligence is accurate, destroying the hive mind will cause their entire command structure to collapse."
"And if your intelligence is not accurate,"
She smiled, a thin expression that did not reach her eyes. "Then we'll adapt. We always adapt."
I hesitated, then asked the question that had been haunting me since my arrival. "Why are you doing this? You have every reason to let us die. We attacked you. We tried to conquer you. And now you're sending your children to die fighting our war?"
Director Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the last ships disappear into the void. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with something I could not quite identify.
Do you know what humanity means, Harmonist? Not the species, but the word itself.
I shook my head.
it means compassion, kindness, the quality of being humane. She turned to face me, and I saw tears glistening in her eyes. We have done terrible things to each other over the course of our history. Terrible, unforgivable things. But we have also shown kindness to strangers, compassion to enemies, mercy to those who tried to destroy us. That is what makes us human, not our capacity for violence, but our capacity for grace. "You could have destroyed us," I whispered. "After our attacks, after everything we did, you could have wiped us from existence. We gave you every reason to." "Yes," she agreed, "we could have. And there are those among us who wanted exactly that. But we chose differently. Because being human means choosing differently, even when the easier path leads to vengeance." She placed her hand on my shoulder, a gesture of comfort that I had not expected and did not deserve.
"We're not fighting for you, Harmonist. We're not fighting because you asked us to, or because we feel obligated to save you. We're fighting because the Vorith represent everything we have spent our entire existence struggling against. They are the darkness that consumes, the void that devours, and we will not allow them to spread unopposed through the galaxy, regardless of what other species have done to us."
"You're fighting for yourselves," I said, understanding finally. "We're fighting for everyone," she corrected, "because that's what we do. That's who we are." The reports began arriving on the 5th day. The human fleet had engaged the Vorith defensive perimeter as planned, but the battle had been far more intense than expected. The Vorith had adapted to human tactics faster than anticipated, deploying new weapons and strategies that inflicted heavy casualties on the attacking forces.
I watched the updates scroll across the displays in the station's command center,
my heart's pounding with each new notification. Hundreds of human ships destroyed, thousands of casualties. The strike teams had reached the outer regions of Vorith space, but were facing fierce resistance.
"They're losing," I said to Director Chen, my voice hollow. "The Vorith are too strong."
She shook her head, her eyes fixed on the tactical displays. "They're not losing, they're learning."
I did not understand what she meant until the 7th day. The human fleet had retreated from the initial engagement, regrouping in a nearby system while their commanders analyzed the Vorith's new tactics. I expected despair, recriminations, perhaps even surrender. What I witnessed instead was something entirely different.
The humans adapted. Within 48 hours, they had developed countermeasures for every new Vorith weapon. Their shipyards, mobile facilities I had not even known existed, began producing modified vessels designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Vorith defenses. Their scientists, working in shifts around the clock, created entirely new weapon systems based on data collected during the failed assault.
And then they attacked again. This time, the Vorith lines shattered. Human ships tore through their defensive perimeter like it wasn't there, their new weapons cutting through biomechanical armor that had resisted everything the Concordat could deploy. The strike teams reached the central hive world, and what followed was a battle that defied anything in my experience. I watched the recordings in silence, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Human soldiers fighting through corridors filled with Vorith constructs, their weapons blazing and their formations never breaking. Human ships engaging Vorith dreadnoughts 10 times their size and winning. Human commanders making decisions in fractions of seconds, coordinating attacks across millions of kilometers with impossible precision. They fought like nothing I had ever seen, like nothing anyone had ever seen. And they won.
The Vorith hive mind fell on the 9th day. Its destruction sent shockwaves through the entire Vorith collective, severing the connections that allowed their biomechanical constructs to function as a unified force. Within hours, Vorith fleets across the galaxy fell silent, their ships drifting aimlessly as the central intelligence that controlled them ceased to exist.
The war was over, not through negotiation or gradual attrition, but through the complete and total elimination of the Vorith's ability to wage war. In less than 2 weeks, humanity had accomplished what the Concordat could not achieve in years of desperate fighting. I wept when the news arrived. I wept for my lost people, my destroyed home world, all the billions who had died before humanity chose to intervene. I wept for the human soldiers who had sacrificed themselves, fighting a war that was never theirs. And I wept for the future. A future I had not believed possible just weeks ago. Director Chen found me on the observation deck, staring out at the stars with tears streaming down my face. She stood beside me in silence for a long time, allowing me to grieve without interruption. "It's over," she said finally. "The Vorith are broken. Your people are safe." "My people are nearly extinct," I whispered. "We have lost our homeworld, our fleets, our culture. We are survivors, nothing more." "Survivors become civilizations," she said gently. "It's not always pretty, and it's not always fast, but life finds a way. It always finds a way." I turned to look at her, this small, fragile-seeming human who led a species capable of ending galactic civilizations. What happens now? What does humanity want from us? She smiled, that same tired, knowing smile I had seen so many times. "We want
What we've always wanted, Harmonist. Peaceful coexistence, mutual cooperation, the chance to explore this universe together without fear of conquest or annihilation.
After everything we did to you.
After everything, she confirmed, holding grudges serves no one. Building bridges serves everyone. I bowed my head, overwhelmed by a gratitude I had no words to express. I do not understand you, I admitted. I have studied your species for weeks. I have spoken with your soldiers and scientists, your leaders and common citizens, and I still do not understand how you can be so strong and yet so merciful, so terrifying and yet so kind. Director Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost contemplative.
There's an old story among my people, a parable about a scorpion and a frog. The scorpion asks the frog to carry it across a river, and the frog refuses, fearing it will be stung. The scorpion promises not to sting, because doing so would mean they would both drown. The frog agrees, and halfway across the river, the scorpion stings it anyway. As they both sink beneath the water, the frog asks why. The scorpion replies, "It is my nature."
She turned to face me fully, her eyes reflecting the distant stars.
Most species, when they hear that story, focus on the scorpion. They see it as a warning about trusting those who might betray you. But humans focus on something else. We ask ourselves, what if the scorpion could choose differently? What if it could overcome its nature and become something better?
She placed her hand over her heart, a gesture I had learned signified sincerity among humans. That's who we are, Harmonists. We are the species that chooses differently. We have violence in our nature, terrible, devastating violence. But we also have something else. Something that allows us to overcome what we are and become what we choose to be. We call it humanity, but it's really just will. The determination to be better than our instincts tell us to be.
And that is why you fight? I asked. To protect those who cannot protect themselves?
We fight because we can, she said simply. Because if we don't, who will? The universe is vast and dark and filled with things that want to consume everything in their path. Someone has to stand against that darkness. Someone has to say, no further. It might as well be us.
I remained among the humans for another month as recovery operations began. Human ships fanned out across former Vorath space, liberating captured worlds and providing humanitarian aid to populations that had been enslaved for generations. They asked nothing in return. No tribute, no territory, no acknowledgement of their superiority. They simply helped, because helping was what they had chosen to do.
The survivors of my people were gathered and transported to temporary shelters, where human medical teams treated the wounded and human counselors helped the traumatized begin the long process of healing. I watched humans working alongside my people, showing kindness to the survivors of a civilization that had tried to conquer them, and I finally understood something that had eluded me my entire life. Strength is not measured in weapons or fleets or the age of your civilization. Strength is measured in choices. The choice to show mercy when vengeance would be easier. The choice to help when indifference would be safer. The choice to stand against darkness when looking away would be simpler. Humanity was strong, not because they could destroy us, but because they chose not to. They were powerful, not because of their weapons, but because of their capacity to use that power with restraint and compassion. On my last day on the human station, Director Chen called me to her office.
She looked even more tired than when I had first met her, the weight of the war and its aftermath clearly visible in every line of her face. But her eyes were still sharp, still knowing, still kind. "You'll be returning to your people tomorrow," she said. "The recovery efforts are progressing well. In a few years, you'll have established new colonies, rebuilt your civilization. It won't be the same as it was, but it will be yours."
Because of you, I said. Because humanity chose to save us when we deserved to be destroyed.
She shook her head. "You didn't deserve to be destroyed, Harmonist. You made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but no one deserves extinction. No one deserves to see their entire species consumed by darkness."
And yet, that is exactly what you did to the Vorith.
Her expression flickered, a shadow of something passing behind her eyes. The Vorith were different. They were not a species making mistakes. They were a species that had become the mistake. Their entire existence was built on consumption, on the destruction of everything that wasn't them. There was no reasoning with them, no possibility of coexistence. Allowing them to continue meant allowing the annihilation of every other form of life in the galaxy.
"So you annihilated them instead?" "Yes," she met my gaze without flinching. "We did, and I won't pretend it was an easy decision or that everyone agreed with it. Some of our people believed we should have found another way, should have tried harder to find a peaceful solution. But sometimes there is no peaceful solution. Sometimes the only choice is between allowing evil to spread unchecked or becoming terrible enough to stop it."
She stood and walked to her window, gazing out at the stars that had witnessed so much death and destruction in recent months.
That's the burden we carry, Harmonist. The knowledge that we are capable of ending civilizations, and the responsibility to use that capability only when absolutely necessary. It would be easier to be conquerors, to use our power to dominate and control, but we choose to be guardians instead, protectors, even when it would be simpler to be something else.
I rose and moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same stars that had burned indifferently while my people died and humanity rose to save them.
"The title of your people's declaration," I said quietly. "When you responded to the Vorith's aggression, you said, 'Humanity declares the end.' I thought at first it meant the end of the war, or the end of the Vorith. But it means something else, doesn't it?"
Director Chen was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper.
"It means the end of an era. The end of a galaxy where predator species can consume others without consequence. The end of a universe where civilizations can be destroyed simply because they lack the power to defend themselves." She turned to face me, and I saw something ancient and terrible and beautiful in her eyes. We declared the end of the galaxy as it was, and the beginning of the galaxy as it will be.
"And what will it be?"
She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "Whatever we choose to make it, all of us together, human and Concordat and every other species willing to work toward a better future. The darkness has been pushed back. Now we build something worth protecting in its place." I left the human station the next day, carrying with me memories that would shape my people for generations to come. As my ship pulled away from the orbital platform, I looked back at the small blue world that had nearly been our victim and had instead become our salvation. Earth hung in the void like a jewel, beautiful and fragile seeming. It was not an impressive world by galactic standards, small, wet, orbiting an unremarkable star in an unfashionable corner of the galaxy. There was nothing about it that suggested the terrible power that had emerged from its surface.
But appearances, I had learned, meant nothing.
Humanity had walked among the stars for barely 2 centuries, and in that brief span of cosmic time, they had become something that ancient civilizations like mine could not comprehend. They were warriors and healers, destroyers and builders, terrible and beautiful in equal measure. They carried the violence of their past in their blood and the hope for a better future in their hearts.
We had declared war on them, thinking to use them as tools or destroy them as threats.
They had declared the end of everything we thought we knew.
And now, as I traveled back to the survivors of my people, I carried with me a truth that would echo through the ages. The galaxy would never be the same. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably, not through conquest or domination, but through choice. Humanity's choice to stand against darkness, to show mercy to those who deserved none, to be better than they had any reason to be.
The stars still burned in silence, indifferent to the civilizations beneath them. But those civilizations were no longer alone. They had a guardian now, a species that had emerged from the crucible of their own brutal history to become something unprecedented in the galaxy's long existence. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. I am Valfrix Solenoff, third harmonist of the Celestine Concordat. I have lived for thousands of years and witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. I have seen stars born and watched them die. I thought I understood the universe and my place within it.
I was wrong. About everything. The humans taught me that age does not confer wisdom, that strength is not measured in weapons or numbers or the length of your history, that the youngest species in the room might also be the most powerful, not despite their youth, but because of it.
They taught me that the galaxy is not a dark and dangerous place to be survived, but a vast canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of civilization and hope. They taught me that even in the aftermath of terrible war, there is room for healing, for growth, for change. Most of all, they taught me that the end of one thing is always the beginning of something else. The Concordat as we knew it is gone, destroyed by our own arrogance and the Vorith's aggression. But from its ashes, something new is rising, a partnership between species, a collaboration between worlds, a future built on the foundations of mutual respect and shared purpose.
The galaxy declared war on Earth. Countless fleets, ancient civilizations, powers that had ruled the stars for millennia, all turned against a single small world and its unremarkable inhabitants. Humanity declared the end. Not the end of themselves, as we had intended, not the end of hope or life or possibility, but the end of the old order, the end of a galaxy ruled by predators and dominated by fear, the end of everything we thought we knew about power and survival and what it means to be strong. And from that ending, a new beginning. I do not know what the future holds. I am old and tired, and I have seen too much death to believe in easy answers or simple solutions. But for the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel something that I thought had died with my homeworld. I feel hope. Because humanity is out there now, walking among the stars, carrying with them the weight of their terrible history and the promise of a better tomorrow. They are watching. They are waiting. And if the darkness ever rises again, if some new threat emerges to threaten the civilizations of this galaxy,
They will be ready.
The scorpion chose to sting because it was in its nature, but humanity chose differently. They chose to be the frog that saves the scorpion anyway, because saving is in their nature too. They chose to be the species that stands between the darkness and everything it would consume, because standing is what they do.
they chose to be human. And in doing so, they changed everything. I transmit this record to whatever civilizations might find it in the ages to come. Let it serve as a warning and a lesson. Let it remind you that appearances deceive, that strength takes many forms, that the small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star is not as helpless as it seems.
Let it remind you that the galaxy declared war on Earth.
And humanity declared the end.
Remember that. Remember us. Remember them.
And when you look up at the stars and wonder what looks back, take comfort in knowing that something does. Something ancient and young, terrible and kind, violent and merciful beyond measure.
Something human. May the light guide you. May your people endure. And may you never forget the lesson that we learned too late. The meek do not inherit the galaxy. The strong do not rule it. The brave shape it.
And humanity is the bravest of us all.